before we kick off this review, I think it's really important to cover off one key detail, and that is that the Svanar Wireless IEMs that I've got here are $499. Now, some of you might be immediately reaching for the stop button, and I understand that, but you might want to stick around because I think these are a bit different from any other wireless on the market. They're pitched at audiophiles, they're focused at audiophiles, they're not really the same as consumer IEMs. And that's because there's a number of different HiFiMan sort of specific technologies baked into the Svanar Wireless that theoretically should make them different from what else is out there.
Don't know where to waste my night. You can come here, join a real low life. Hiding our heads on the pillows. Wonder what real friends are made of. Not gonna leave, been stuck for a while. Drinking from the get-go till I'm too small. Hiding my head on the pillows. Wonder what your friends are made of. Don't be sorry for being honest. Sure you know I'm a fight, but I'ma let go.
As I just alluded to in the opening, the Svanar Wireless IEM from HiFiMan is a $499 IEM, a wireless IEM, but what makes it a bit different from our other IEMs on the market in the consumer space in particular is some of HiFiMan's technologies that are baked in here. These are using HiFiMan's own Himalaya R2R DACs within these IEMs. So within each of these guys, despite them being a small device, I mean they're a chunky IEM but small for general audio devices, despite that size, they've still got an R2R DAC chip in each earpiece. On top of that, they're using HiFiMan's topology diaphragms, which is basically a fancy name for a speaker cone that's designed with different thicknesses, textures, materials, etc. across the surface of the diaphragm to make sure that it moves in a controlled way and therefore delivers a controlled sound, a refined and kind of well-damped sound across all the frequencies. In addition to those custom technologies, we've also got Bluetooth 5.2 with LDAC capabilities in the Svanars. What that means is you've got the best possible Bluetooth codecs working here to give you the best possible clarity and fidelity in the sound. And because of the Bluetooth 5.2, they're also very low latency. So I was able to use these to play games, watch movies, listen to music, and had no sense of any lag between what was happening on a screen and what I was hearing through the IEMs. On top of that, they've got active noise cancelling, and in my testing using them on an aeroplane and in other sources of background noise or other locations of background noise, I found the active noise cancelling on these was just as good as anything else I've tried. Say something like the Samsung Galaxy Buds Pro that I've got here. I don't think there's any noticeable or discernible difference between the active noise cancelling. So they're going to handle all of the regular consumer type tasks, active noise cancelling, calls, etc. But adding over the top of that, the audiophile kind of heritage and design and technology that HiFiMan offers. Now, whether that translates to sound quality, we'll get to that soon. But on paper, these definitely stack up so far. Where they might not stack up for some people is the battery life. And that's because each charge of the earbuds themselves is only going to give you 4 to 6 hours of use depending on the mode that you're using. And so that is worth considering that 4 to 6 hours for some people is plenty. I know for me, it's way more than I'm ever going to use them in one go. But some people might want them to last for a full 8 hours and they're not going to do that without popping them back in the case. So you've got 4 to 6 hours per earbud charge, but then the case itself has 3 more cycles of charge. And that means you can get anywhere from about 16 to 24 hours out of a full charge of the earbuds with a fully charged carry case. I think that should be plenty for most people, but I did want to flag it because some other models on the market have way more capability. The final thing to talk about in terms of specifications, inclusions, accessories, is that you do get a lovely range of tips from HiFiMan with the Svanars, but unfortunately for me at least, none of them fit particularly well. Your mileage may vary, all of our ears are different, so don't judge the tips based on what I'm saying here, but do come in prepared for the fact that you might need to find your own tips to go with the Svanars if you're anything like me. The tip range, as I said, is excellent. But what I found was that with any of the tips I tried from HiFiMan, I could never get a particularly good seal. I never felt like they were as secure in my ear as I wanted them or needed them to be. And in the end, I settled on using the Final Audio E-Type tips for all of my use and all of my testing. So do keep that in mind. But having said that, tips are very cheap, very affordable, and it's a good thing to have in your collection anyway. And so at this point, the Svanar Wireless, as I said before, it kind of stacks up on paper. It doesn't tell you on paper with the specifications why it should be worth $200 or $300 more than another consumer option like, say, the Galaxy Buds Pro, but it certainly has everything it should have to really stack up as a good option in terms of usability and functionality. One of the things I didn't like about the previous generation of HiFiMan wireless earphones was they didn't have top-tier codecs. They weren't particularly user-friendly in terms of the features and the functions they provided, and I think that's been addressed, at least on paper, with the Svanar Wireless. Now, while we're talking about features and functions, I should absolutely mention, I said they've got active noise cancelling, that's true. They've also got, as well as active noise cancelling, they've then got a hi-fi mode, which has no active noise cancelling and is apparently the premium level sound. I say apparently because there's not a big shift between active noise cancelling and hi-fi mode. But then they've also got transparency mode, which I think is an absolute must on any sort of wireless IEM. Because your ear canals are blocked by any sort of wireless IEM, I think having a transparency mode is so key if you're moving into any kind of environment where you need to hear what's going on around you. Of course, you can always take the IEMs out of your ears, but if you're in an office environment, for instance, and you need to hear what's going on, but you still want to listen to music, that's where I think transparency modes are so helpful and so valuable. And the Svanars offer you all of that functionality. They've got everything on paper that you need, and so it all comes back to how they sound. And so all of my testing for the Svanar Wireless has been done, as I alluded to before, with the Final Audio E-Type tips. I was using them in hi-fi mode and with the LDAC codec, so maximum possible sound quality that you can extract from the Svanar Wireless. And what I heard from them was a really lovely sound. They've got treble that's a little bit enhanced at the upper end, but very well controlled and very refined. The treble is enhanced to a point that when I was critically listening, I feel like it does slightly throw off the tonality, but it's only very slightly. It's the sort of shift that I noticed when I was listening critically, but it never even crossed my mind when I was just listening casually before I sat down to do my listening notes. Alongside that sense of treble emphasis, they've also got very nice, clean and crisp transients. So the leading edges of notes, the sort of starting moments, the attack on each sound is very clean, but also again very refined. They're not harsh in any way, but they've got a wonderful sense of articulation and clarity across the board. As we move down into the mid-range, both male and female vocals have a lovely sense of body and richness and fullness to them, but not at the expense of texture and clarity. I think HiFiMan have balanced the tuning really nicely here to give you that sense of body and weight, but not to make them sound thick or rich or overly full. That carries down into the bass, where you've got a lovely solid mid-bass sound, but again it's not overdone. And in fact it's actually perfect, I think, because when you're going out and about with a pair of wireless earphones, you're generally going to be in environments where there is a bit of background noise. And even with active noise cancelling on, it's the lower frequencies that are going to sneak into your ears. It's going to come through vibrations through the earphones, through the bone conduction. That's where the sound gets in. And so it's actually ideal to have wireless earphones tuned with a bit of extra weight and body. I think what HiFiMan have done beautifully here, though, is they've balanced it beautifully where they're tuned to have that bit of extra presence and weight for when you're out and about, but it hasn't been overdone. So if you're putting these in a quiet room, in an office, laying in bed at night, whatever it might be, in those situations, they're still going to sound just right. And I say just right in terms of just enjoyable. They're going to let you enjoy the music. They've got a slightly V-shaped overall tuning, but a very balanced one that doesn't suck out the mids. The mids have still got presence and weight and sort of an availability in the music so that they're not lost in the background, and everything still sounds natural even in a quiet room listening environment. The final thing to mention is that the bass extension doesn't quite go all the way down. They do start to roll off a bit, and so the sub-bass isn't as present as the mid-bass. But having said that, there wasn't a single thing I listened to where I ever felt like the bass was lacking. So unless you're someone that loves that sort of lifted sub-bass sound, where you get that lift around that 30 hertz mark, that's one area that these don't do. But in all other ways, I think the bass presentation is just as good as the excellent mid-range and the excellent treble. And so whilst I'd say that these don't have a completely natural tonality or a completely neutral tonality, what they do have is a very enjoyable and extremely listenable tonality. In terms of technicalities, we should talk about the fact that being a Bluetooth wireless IEM, these are never going to have the detail retrieval of a wired, high-quality audiophile system. But I think for what they are as a wireless IEM with LDAC activated, they're doing a really good job of providing detail and resolution. The soundstage from these is all inside the head as you'd expect from a product like this, But the good news is that the imaging and separation within that space is very good. They do a great job at separating sounds and focusing the image, and there's even just a little bit of depth in the soundstage too. There's not a lot of it, but there's enough to make them sound not like a flat wall of sound. And I think part of that's going to be coming from the fact that they're using the HiFiMan R2R DAC chip, and I think that's delivering a very natural sound that, whilst it's inside the head, is very nicely separated and very easy to enjoy. It's not an artificially flat soundstage, it's not a huge expansive soundstage, it's just a good, solid, immersive listening experience. The final thing to mention is that across all genres I threw at this, and that includes gaming, watching movies, classical music, rock, pop, jazz, blues, you name it, they just work really well across the board. So they're a really solid IEM in my opinion. Now whether they're worth $500, that one's yet to be decided, and it's also a very personal choice. But so far they were absolutely impressing me as a true audiophile wireless IEM. And I think that's the key here. These are not positioned as a consumer IEM. I mean, take a look at them. They're a big, chunky beast of an IEM. Even though they're contoured and they look great and they feel great, they're beautifully made, they've got carbon fiber sections with metal around the outsides, they look and feel fantastic, but even though they're nicely contoured, once they're in the ear, they're still chunky. They still stick out quite a lot, and there's no denying that they're not an IEM that you're going to use for sports or active use. They're more of a commuting, sitting in an office, maybe getting up and walking around a bit, but they're not an active IEM as such. They're much more of an audiophile, wireless listening experience IEM. And so we really do have to talk about whether or not there's a benefit in spending the money for an audiophile wireless IEM, or just getting yourself a great consumer wireless IEM like the Samsung Galaxy Buds Pro here. The Galaxy Buds Pro, when I did my notes for this review, was selling for about $200, so we've got a full $300 difference between these two. That's based on the list price of the HiFiMan Svanar. Knowing HiFiMan, they're probably going to be cheaper at some stage, available with a discount of some sort. But at their full retail list price, it's $300 difference from the Samsungs up to the Svanar. So I was really curious to hear if it was worth that difference. Listening to Sun is Shining by Wilson Diesel, what I heard as I listened was that this is a recording, and I knew this bit coming in, this is a recording that's quite a kind of splashy sort of recording. There's lots going on in the mix. It's not a particularly tidy sounding recording, but it's quite a good one. And what was really interesting about using this recording was it showed me how these two IEMs were able to manage everything going on within that sound. Starting off with the Svanar, it gave me a wonderful sense of separation between the piano, the harmonica, the guitar. There was a really good sense of space, even though it's largely inside the head, maybe just extending a tiny bit beyond the ears. But within that relatively limited space, everything was beautifully separated. There was no sense of overlap or congestion of the sounds. The way the vocal is recorded in this track, it's slightly disembodied. It doesn't have the weight and the presence that it probably should have in a really natural, sort of unmodified recording. And I raise that because despite that nature, I still felt the Svanar handled that vocal really well and focused it really well in the mix. When I moved over to the Samsung Galaxy Buds Pro and I had them in their normal mode, they sounded really lean, very kind of disembodied, a little bit kind of neutral and analytical compared to the Svanar, and not in a good way. I can absolutely appreciate a reference tuning, but it still needs to have a level of refinement and naturality, and that's where the Samsung Galaxy Buds Pro fell way short of the Svanar. And these are a nice IEM, being the Samsungs. They're a good wireless IEM for a consumer product. But it was immediately evident just how far ahead the Svanar Wireless was. Using the bass boost on the Samsung Galaxy Buds Pro did bring them a little bit closer in tonality, but they still couldn't match the refinement, the separation, the detail retrieval. There was still just a huge gulf for me between the two. And a big part of that is that the treble quality from the Samsungs was nowhere near as natural. It was a bit splashy, a little bit harsh, there was no sense of refinement compared to what you got from the Svanar Wireless. As a part of that, the separation of the sounds, the imaging focus was again nowhere near as good from the Samsungs as the Svanar. And I think that started to paint the picture for me of exactly why you might choose to spend the money on the Svanar Wireless, and also why you might not. Where the Svanar Wireless absolutely not just pulls ahead but jumps ahead of something like the Samsung Galaxy Buds Pro is that it's a proper audiophile experience. You're getting imaging, you're getting separation of sounds, you're getting a balanced tonality from top to bottom. All of those things alongside active noise cancelling, taking phone calls, having transparency mode, having a latency-free experience if you're playing games or watching movies. It's doing all of that whilst delivering true audiophile sound. Now, having said that, for many people, the Samsung Galaxy Buds Pro will be more than enough. Many people will put these in their ears and be blown away by their sound quality because they're a lovely sounding wireless IEM. And that's where I say, whether or not these are worth spending $500 on, that's got to be up to you. I can't answer that for you. Personally, I don't know that I would spend $500 on wireless IEMs because in the situations that I'm using them, I'm very rarely paying enough attention. But now that I've got these here, and thank you to HiFiMan for sending them out, now that I've got these here, I don't want to use anything else when it comes to wireless IEMs. These are the ones I reach for every single time because they just do everything so well. They're comfortable. Admittedly, they're not secure in the sense that I wouldn't want to go running or anything with them, but they're comfortable. They're great for just getting around the house, commuting, sitting at my desk, going to a cafe. And on top of that, they're producing sound that is right up there with some really good wired setups. As is always the case, the moment you're talking wireless, it's never going to compete with an equivalently priced wired solution, say a nice dongle and a nice pair of IEMs. But what you're paying for here is a combination of performance sonically and wireless convenience. And in that regard, I think they're absolutely brilliant. So if you want to get the best possible sound you can without wires, I actually think the Svanar Wireless has completely turned the tables. The old HiFiMan Wireless, as I said before, I really didn't like. I recommended everything but them to people. But in the case of the Svanar Wireless, if you've got the budget and you're looking for a true audiophile wireless solution, you should absolutely check these out. They look great, they feel great, and they absolutely sound fantastic. So I'm going to wrap things up here, and as always, I hope you found the video useful, helpful, and informative. If you have, I'd love it if you hit the like button, and please subscribe and ring the notification bell if you haven't already. For now though, let me leave you to the music, so happy listening, and I'll see you here next time on Passion for Sound.